You get cut off in traffic this morning. Someone jumps the line at the coffee shop. Maybe someone at work takes credit for something you did, and what do you do about it? You call someone. A manager, a police non-emergency line, HR. Somewhere out there is a system built to handle it for you. You don't even think about it. The system just exists quietly in the background of your entire life. Now take all of that away. No police, no courts, no jail, no government, just you and the same 50 people you'll live with for the rest of your life. And someone in that group just stole from you. Or worse, someone in that group just killed one of you. What happens next? For 95% of human history, that wasn't a hypothetical. That was Tuesday. And the answer to what happened next is stranger, slower, and far more brutal than most people expect. So let's start with the basic math of the problem. For most of human history, people lived in bands of about 25 to 100 individuals, roughly the same group size anthropologists believe Homo erectus lived in almost 2 million years ago, small enough that everyone knew everyone, small enough that there was no anonymity to hide behind. That sounds peaceful. In a lot of ways, it was, but here's what doesn't get talked about enough. Small groups don't eliminate conflict, they concentrate it. A stolen piece of meat isn't a minor dispute. It's a conflict between two people you're going to sit next to at the fire tonight and tomorrow night and every night after that, probably for the rest of both your lives. There's no walking away. There's no new city to move to. You are stuck with these people and they're stuck with you. So when something goes wrong, a fight, a theft, an affair, a killing, the group can't just call someone else to deal with it. There is no someone else. The group is the entire justice system, every single time. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm spent decades studying how egalitarian foraging societies actually handle conflict, building a comparative database of dozens of hunter-gatherer groups from 6 different world regions: the Arctic, Africa, Asia, Australia, and the Americas. And what he found was a strikingly consistent pattern. Punishment didn't start with violence. It started with something much smaller: talk. The first tool almost every documented forager society reached for was ridicule. Public teasing, aimed directly at whoever was getting too greedy, too aggressive, or too full of themselves. Among groups like the Jew hoansi of the Kalahari Desert, a hunter who came home boasting about a big kill wouldn't be praised. He'd be mocked. Someone would look at the animal he'd carried in for hours and say something like, "That's what you call meat? My grandmother could have caught something better." Not because the meat was bad, because pride is dangerous in a group of 50 people who all depend on each other equally. That sounds almost gentle compared to what you might expect from ancient justice. But ridicule is a precision weapon in a small group. There's no anonymity to absorb the blow. Everyone you know just watched you get taken down a notch, and there's nowhere to go to escape the memory of it tomorrow. If ridicule didn't work, the group escalated. Gossip spread the reputation wider. Then came direct criticism. No longer joking, just blunt. Then shunning. People stop talking to you, stop sharing food with you, stop meeting your eyes. In a species that survives entirely through cooperation, social invisibility is not a small punishment. It's closer to a slow-motion emergency. But sometimes it didn't work. Sometimes a person kept stealing, kept fighting, kept intimidating people, even after being ridiculed and shunned. And when that happened, groups had one more option before things turned fatal: exile. Banishment meant walking out of camp alone, without your group's protection, your group's shared food, your group's collective knowledge of where water and game could be found that season. In most of the environments early humans lived in, that wasn't really a punishment with a fixed sentence. It was often closer to a death sentence, with the timeline left open. There's a documented account from Inuit communities, recorded by anthropologist E. Adamson Hoebel, that captures just how far social pressure alone could push someone. A man who had become a repeated danger to his group, through violence, through breaking trust again and again, reached a point where the group's judgment against him became so total that he walked out into the snow alone at night, lay down, and froze to death. No one had to raise a weapon. The verdict itself was the execution. That's the part that surprises people the most. In many of these societies, the group almost never wanted to be the one to physically kill someone. Exile and social pressure did the job instead, more often than violence did, but sometimes even exile wasn't enough, because sometimes the person was already too dangerous to simply walk away. Boehm's research is blunt about this. When a group member became a repeated, serious threat, a habitual killer, a violent bully no amount of ridicule could touch, some documented foraging societies did carry out executions. Not as chaotic mob violence, but as something closer to a quiet, collective decision. In several recorded cases among Arctic groups, a small number of senior men would discuss the situation, agree the person could no longer be managed, and one of them, sometimes with the tacit agreement of the man's own relatives, would kill him, deliberately and usually only after every social tool that came before it had already failed. This is one of the strangest reversals in the whole story. The death penalty may be one of humanity's oldest times legal tools, not one of its newest. Boehm's comparative data shows capital punishment turning up in documented foraging societies across all 6 inhabited world regions, meaning it likely isn't a side effect of complex civilization. It's closer to a pressure valve that egalitarian bands use specifically to stop any one person from dominating or endangering everyone else. Ironically, it's part of what kept these societies equal in the first place. Nobody could outbully the group because the group, collectively, could always outlast or outkill any single person in it. Here's what nobody talks about. None of this happened randomly. It followed a ladder, and every rung mattered. Teasing, gossip, direct criticism, shunning, exile. And only at the very top, execution reserved almost exclusively for people the group had already tried everything else on. Anthropologist Boehm calls the underlying system a reverse dominance hierarchy. In most primate groups, the physically strongest individual dominates everyone else. Early human bands appear to have flipped that arrangement upside down. The Times majority times dominates any individual who tries to bully, intimidate, or hoard power. The tools weren't spears and clubs. They were laughter, silence, and the threat of being left alone in a world that did not forgive being alone. And this wasn't unique to forager bands only. Even after humans started living in larger, more complex societies, versions of the same ladder kept showing up. In tribal Montenegro, blood feuds and clan-based retaliation operated on strict, recognized rules about who could be targeted and why an entire unwritten legal code enforced purely through communal memory and reputation, not a single written law. There's one more piece of this that's easy to miss. Almost none of it was arbitrary. Hoebel's research into groups like Arctic hunter-gatherer communities found something close to a functioning legal logic underneath what looks, from the outside, like simple social pressure. There were shared expectations. Everyone understood obligations to share food, rules about who owed what to whom, consequences that scaled with how serious and how repeated the offense was. In other words, there were no judges wearing robes, no written law books, no jail cells, but there was still due process, in its own form. A single accusation rarely ended someone's place in the group. It usually took a pattern repeated, witnessed, agreed upon by the people who had to live with the consequences either way. The group times was times the jury, the judge, and, when it came to it, occasionally the executioner too, but it moved through every earlier option first, because losing a member, one way or another, was expensive for everyone left behind. Now think about your last argument with a coworker. A stranger cut you off in traffic, and you probably forgot about it by lunch. Someone disagreed with you online, and the worst thing that happened was you closed the app. You have an entire invisible infrastructure, police, courts, HR departments, terms of service, built specifically so you never have to personally decide whether someone deserves to be shunned by everyone you know, exiled from everything you have, or worse. For most of human history, there was no infrastructure. There was only the group, watching, remembering, and deciding together exactly how much of you they were willing to keep around. We didn't invent justice when we invented police stations. We just outsourced something humans had already been doing, carefully and communally, around firelight for hundreds of thousands of years.